been a couple of requests on how to do stack signs. This is my method. I hope you enjoy it. This will be a Wisconsin Badgers logo stack sign. It's pretty simple. We'll have 3 layers total. I'm using a Spire, I'm using Carbide Motion, and a Shapeoko3 XXL. I do have an HDZ upgrade on it. That'll be later in this video. First thing, when you open up a Spire, set up your material, 24 by 24 by half. I'm running this as the size of the sign I want, and I'll be using 3 sheets of this, so I'll know exactly where to place it once I set it up on the machine. I don't have to re-zero, and I don't have to deal with any of that. So 24 24, ½ inch, it's close enough. I'm machining, or I'm zeroing to the machine bed, so I don't have to be exact up there. Just as long as I'm a little bit bigger, I'll be fine. Datum position is going to be the bottom left of the material, and this is where we start. I'm going to bring in a logo, so I went and found a clean logo on the internet, so I'll go ahead and import it. So that is the import bitmap. First thing I want to do is bring this up to the size that I want to use, and I'm just watching the edges of the circle as I'm dragging this across. Alright, that looks close enough. Next thing I want to do is we'll go to the align selected objects, and this is aligned to the material, so that just aligned it to the material. Okay, so we're going to select that. We'll go ahead and trace bitmap. I have found the best way to do this one in this instance is to do a black and white first, because it gives me my solid outlines that I'm looking for. So we'll go ahead and preview and apply. It's pretty simple. I didn't do any other modifications to that. Okay. Next thing I want to do is select it again. This time we're going to do a color, but the only thing that I didn't get in that last one was the red. So individually, we're going to go ahead and select the red block. That's what I want. We're going to preview, apply, and close. Let's go ahead and move this out of the way. See what we're left with. Looks pretty good. Okay, so where we go from here is I look at best fit and find out what layers I want to use and what colors I'm going to use for each layer, because each color is going to be its own separate layer. So it looks like the first one I use is red, because it looks like I can just make that the solid background. And just to make this easier of a project, I didn't want to deal with this, because that would have been a very thin banded outline, and I don't feel like cutting that. So we're going to go ahead and ungroup this. Ungroup all these objects. Okay, so for this, I want to keep all my text and stuff in the same group, so I'm going to be grouping and ungrouping a couple of times. So I just left drag over, and whatever that dotted line touches, it'll deselect or select. So I'm going to group these objects back. Okay, and I want to delete that. I don't want that boundary. You could remain or retain that one to use your red boundary, but for this it doesn't really matter. Okay, next thing I'm going to do is, since we trace this, there's going to be a lot of imperfections in this perimeter, and when I cut it, I'll show you just to provide the example, because I can sand it out. But to get ahead of that before, to minimize the amount of sanding, is you'll go ahead and draw your own circle, a new one. So draw a circle. That looks pretty close. We'll apply it. I know I'm going to need a couple more, so find the center. We're going to draw that circle there. Apply that. These two also get circles. There. And here. Okay. Apply and close. So what I want to do is try to get these circles out of the way by themselves. Alright, so I'm going to select everything. I've retained a couple of groups. I know these are part of those groups, so when I deselect those, the only thing left should be those circles. So I'll go ahead and, let's try it again. Holding shift, dragging across, and moving my circles out of the way. And to make this easier, later we'll go ahead and group these. Alright, next thing I want to do is get rid of the circles that we just recreated. So we're going to select this. We're going to ungroup objects. And we're going to deselect that. Deselect that. And group the text. And that just so happens that's going to be our white boundary minus our trademark logos. We're going to do something different with that. So next thing I want to do is come in here and delete those circles. Alright, we have another one, so we're going to ungroup these. Deselect that. Group these back. Select that circle and delete it. Ungroup. It looks like that's going to stay ungrouped. Delete those. And I made that toolbar go away. Fat fingered it. Alright, so to make all this centered up again, we can grab this and align to material. Puts everything back where it was. And if you didn't want to do that, you can come back here and grab one of these and align to the selection. Either way, works. Okay. Alright, now let's go ahead and select that and delete it. It was doubled up. We'll select this, ungroup, back to layers, and I only want to remove this from that group. So we're going to group those objects back up. And I made a mistake, so we're going to ungroup those objects. We'll deselect that, group those objects, come back here and grab these back, and group those. And the reason I'm grouping is to be easier for the toolpaths later. Okay. So now we're going to establish some toolpaths. So the first sheet of plywood that we're going to throw in, we're going to cut the big red circle. So we're going to ungroup our circles that we made. And I want to use just this one. So we're going to run a profile toolpath. We're going to use a 1/8 inch downcut bit. I do want to add ramps. It's going to let the end mill clear chips while this is going and not force them down into a single hole as it plunges. Also, if you're trimmed, if your tramming is off, if you're not perfect, then it'll also minimize the telltale of where the bit plunged into the material. Okay, so all that looks good. 1/2 inch, 3 passes makes sense. Not using tabs. I don't like using tabs and ramps. So we'll go ahead and calculate that. Preview the visible toolpath. Delete it. So that's what we're going to get out of the first sheet of plywood. That's going to be the red layer. So I don't know what your file naming process is, but I'll say this is my red layer. And the datum is in the bottom left. Machine bed. And we're using an 1/8 inch bit. Looks good. We're going to duplicate that because we're using the same material. But what we want to tackle now is, let's go with the black layer. So that's the back W and this border. So let's grab these 2 circles and the back W. We're going to group that. We're going to double click into this toolpath. We're going to go back and grab the black layer and calculate. So reset the preview because we're cutting this. This will be the second sheet of plywood to be loaded into the machine. Preview visible toolpaths. That'll be waste, and this outside will be waste. So that's what we're going to paint black. And that makes sense and looks good. So let's go ahead and rename this. All the other parameters stayed the same. We're just changing the color. Alright, so let's go ahead and duplicate. Because once again, this will be the third layer that we're using, which is going to be the white layer. Okay. And double click in. We've already got our white layer selected, or grouped rather. We're going to calculate. We're going to go back. I don't want this ramped. This one, they're smaller pieces. Reset preview. Okay, and I'll show you. So preview all these toolpaths. Oh no. Reset preview. Preview visible toolpath. Okay, so when the machine cuts, I don't want it to ramp because of these pieces right here. So when these separate out, they'll have a tendency, even though I'm using a downcut bit, to move. And if the machine wants to clear and this comes out partly and gets lodged in, this will cause enough resistance to have the machine skip steps. So to minimize that, what I want it to do is cut and not ramp while it's cutting in. Because if it were to ramp on, let's say, this one, there would be a little bit of material in here, and that would be enough to cause it to tear out, so I want to keep running, and that'll cause it to jam up. It'll also cause it to come out of place a little bit. So you can counter that by using tape and glue. This is a 24 by 24 inch sheet of plywood. I'm not going to do that. I'm just going to watch my machine. I'm not one to walk away from my machine when it runs for, running these small detailed stuff. I won't walk away from the machine. I'm typically run on top of it. And when it's cutting this entire project, I'm probably going to be in the garage so I can hear it as well. All right, so let's get rid of that. Make sure this looks good. Okay, and that's going to be the layer that we're going to paint white. So rename. That'll be the white layer. Okay. The next thing we want to do is we're going to use a laser when I get it all put together to burn these in, because my 1/8 inch bit does not have the fidelity to cut in here, and it makes it look like trash. So I've programmed my laser to be an end mill, and I just added an end mill tool into a spire. The diameter on the tool is 1,000th, which is fine enough. I run a 10,000ths path depth and step over of 1,000th. So it'll be 100%. It's a laser, no big deal. And depending on what you're using, the spindle speed determines the power of the laser. This is 100%, and I'm running 25 inches a minute. And the plunge rate is really not relevant. Doesn't really matter. The other thing I do different when I'm running the laser is I don't want the Z to move. The reason I don't want it plunging very far is, get out of here, is when it starts plunging, the M command goes in to turn the laser on. So as it's plunging, the laser's on, and that entire time it's going to be cutting, and it leaves really dark spots wherever the tool plunges. And to manually force your Z from moving from the plunge is go material setup. Under the clearance and plunge, put these at 10,000th, both of them. And that will make the plunge so small that it's not really relevant, and you'll minimize the amount that you burn. And the rest of this video will be shot next to the CNC machine. All right, we're out here at the CNC now. This is that piece of material I was talking about. This is what happens when you get in a bind. I don't remember what it hit. It was probably something in the rails over here, and it didn't want to keep going. Anywho, all right, so we're about to cut the white layer off on this. This is just a 1/2 inch project ply. It's got that white paint you buy at Home Depot. It's relatively fresh. I'm gonna put a down cut bit in, and it'll give a pretty clean cut like this, because this was with a down cut bit earlier as well. And I got 2 more sheets, or 2 more pieces of plywood that are exact same size. So it'll help out. Jog the machine. I do like my touchscreen computer. It's a Lenovo. This is its standalone. This is its entire purpose in life. Go ahead and send it forward. This is the down cut. So most everything I do that's through cuts, I zero down in the machine bed. So from yesterday, it should already be zero here, but we'll just verify. That was the biggest lesson I learned when I first got this, is I forget to put that clip on it. And things start to go kind of wonky if you don't put that bit on it. So let's go ahead and probe. And what I've done is when I set these T-tracks, I ran my laser down to get a straight line, so I know that these are parallel with my rails. So when I align down my T-track down that way, it's X is my fence, my reference point. I know it's going to be square in that axis, so I've got it set up that way. And then when I zero here, I'm going to drop a line down here. That way I know where to put the material for the next cuts. That way I don't have to re-zero. Okay, that's zero enough. And this is having a hard time today. Set 0, 0x, 0y. All right. Done. Run. Load new file. Okay. Let's see if this works. Looks like it's going to work. Okay, a couple things during that cut. I did notice that my ramp isn't there. And that my clearance when it travels is only 10,000th of an inch because I had it set up for the laser. But since I'm messing with some pretty flat stock and I've just trimmed my waste board, I'm not too terribly concerned about the clearance height. I don't think I'm gonna scratch anything. If I do, well, then I'll be buying another piece of material. So that's our first puzzle piece. This is straight off. So the downcut bit packs the dust into the crack. All right, so it keeps the material from moving around, and it also makes sure that your burrs are on the back side. So this is my tram piece. Don't worry about that. I thought about making a video for that, but I didn't. And my shop is a mess, so we'll do the cleanup here later. All right, we zeroed off the surface earlier, so you're gonna notice that there isn't cut through. I don't have to worry about it. Apologize for my camera editing skills. My GoPro hasn't been charged or used in a while, and I think my phone is actually better than my GoPro now. So as mentioned earlier, I'm just going to move the material back where I had it, so I know my T-tracks are square. And now I don't have to re-zero anything. I'll just clamp back down and start running the files. I knew this was going to happen. Just wanted to show as an example, when we turned the picture into a vector, the circles were not perfect because it's still trying to take an image. So you see the machine is accurate enough to pick up all that stuff and actually, you know, make all these imperfections come to life. If you want that to go away, you just manually go in there and draw a circle, and that'll be a clean vector for you. Again, excuse the mess, and I don't have my camera set up, so this is the view y'all get. It's gonna be quick and dirty. Maybe when I move, I'll actually get my place set up. So for cleaning up the edges, my benchtop sander, invaluable for large pieces. Forgot to run video. Now we're just rattle canning all the separate parts. After a little bit of rattle can, now we have a bunch of pieces that we get to place to make sure it fits. And then we're going to go ahead and use a 5-minute epoxy to go ahead and stick everything down. Okay, and here's where I realized that all the videos that I took of me gluing up the boards were corrupted and didn't transfer off my phone. To sum that up, I used a 5-minute epoxy. Gorilla Glue is my choice. I haven't used any others just because the Gorilla Glue works and I haven't had any issue with it. Tips, don't mix up too much. Remember, it's a 5-minute epoxy. It sets up pretty quick, so mix enough that you can use inside of about 4 minutes. Okay, next thing I'm going to do is see where my laser program runs. See how far I was off on the letters that I glued down. Okay, and this video is going to show setting up the laser to see if the laser path would burn the trademark and registered logos in a good enough spot. No, it's not going to. I did not do my glue up accurate enough because I didn't use 3 pieces of material like I recommended. I was using what I had in the shop. And what I end up doing is going and rewriting all of the laser programs or the laser files to get really close to my origin. That way I can just set up each one of them individually to burn it where I wanted it to. Okay, so what we're about to do now is reformatting the files. I'll 0 here, cut the stencil, pull it, and I'll go back over with some white paint. I don't really mess with the bottled up paints, so don't mind the stain that fell on the floor. I gotta sand that up. Grab some paint over here and just touch it up. Oh no, don't splatter it. Don't touch that, I can clean it up when it dries. Okay, while this is drying up, talk about hanging solutions. Easiest thing I found to use is a French cleat type thing. I'm gonna use some of that leftover 1/2-inch plywood that came off some of the drops. I'll run it through, put a 45-degree on it, cut this in half, and attach half of it to the back and the other half goes to the wall. Okay, the 45's cut. My top is up there. This is going to get attached on the back. This gets attached on the wall. And it comes in here and grabs like that. That way when you have this level on the wall and this is level with what you're hanging, you don't have to do anything else. And it's still really, really easy. So I do that when I have larger pieces like this. These are just extra scrap we can put over here to keep the distance off the wall when it goes to get hung. So this is going to use some wood glue. The reason I'm using wood glue is I'm about to brad this, and this is all bare wood on this side, so I don't have issues with it. I'm not too picky where these go. One is going to get as square as possible. Then it's a square sign. And when I put the material in, I'm just going to reference off the grain of the plywood. And that's going to get me close enough for this sign. Nothing fancy. I don't have any 3/4 inch brad nails. I got 1-inch brad nails. That means if I shot these straight in, I'd probably punch through on the back side. So to avoid that, these are going to go in at angles. Keep those from punching through on the wall when it gets hung, because that'll be flush against the wall. I'm going to go ahead and tap those down. And this is where this project is going to stop. Came together pretty good. And if you wanted to, you could put another circle back here and then run the LED lights, the 5mm LED lights on the back end, and you can backlight it.